The 7-year tribulation begins at the moment of the signing of the peace covenant between the Antichrist and Israel. Before the peace covenant can be executed, there are 12 events or signs that will occur. These 12 signs are the evidence that we are living in the latter days. Jesus talked to his disciples about 3 which have already happened. 2 more have taken place that needed to happen, and the remaining 7 must happen or begin to happen before the start of the tribulation. In this video, we will take a deeper look into the 5 things that have already happened in a few minutes. In our next lessons, we will look at the 7 things that are yet to happen and 1 that is clearly in progress. The events that have already happened are these: World War I and World War II from 1914 to 1918 and from 1939 to 1945. Famines that have occurred and continue to occur. Likewise, earthquakes have occurred and continue to occur. The United Nations recognition of Israel as a national state took place in 1948. Then Jerusalem and the Temple Mount was added to Israel in the Six-Day War of 1967. It is these 5 events that we will discuss in more detail in a minute. The 7 events yet to happen will be shown next. The timeline bars are to help you understand the sequence and likely overlap and are not intended to depict any particular timing. The next event to happen is the Russian invasion of Israel. This will be followed by the creation of the one world government, or the governing authority over the world governments. This will then be subdivided into 10 areas of oversight or kingdoms. During this time, the Antichrist will rise in influence and authority. As we get closer to the tribulation, Israel will fall into a period of false security. During the tribulation, Israel will be worshiping in its 3rd temple. The preparations for the temple are already being done. The building of the temple will occur either shortly before or immediately after the start of the tribulation. The last thing to occur prior to the signing of the peace covenant will be the evidence of the preparations for the signing of the peace covenant. Now let's take a deeper look into the 5 that have already occurred or are well underway. Before we begin, let's approach our study of prophecy with 2 points of caution. First and foremost, Israel stands at the core of biblical prophecy. Israel is God's focal point in the scriptural narrative. To truly grasp the essence of prophecy, we must always consider how it relates to Israel and its destiny. Second, caution is paramount when correlating current events with prophetic texts. During the COVID pandemic, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and even the recent solar eclipse, many were quick to declare these events as prophetic fulfillments. Don't become what I call a prophychondriac. That is someone who sees every headline as a fulfillment of prophecy. There are signs to watch for, but not everything is a sign. Now let's see what Jesus had to say about the end times in Matthew chapter 24. As Jesus and the disciples are leaving the temple grounds, Jesus tells them that the temple and its adjacent buildings will all be destroyed. When they arrive at the Mount of Olives, a little more than a half-mile east of the temple grounds, the disciples ask him 3 questions. When will these things be? In other words, when will the temple be destroyed? What will be the sign of your coming? That would be for his coming to set up his messianic kingdom. And what will be the sign of the end of the age? Remember, the disciples were unaware of a first coming and a second coming, so to them the end of the age would have been the end of the current age prior to his second coming. Unknown to them about the current age was the period of the church age, as well as the tribulation. Nevertheless, Jesus includes those in his response. Matthew does not record Jesus' answer to the first question about the destruction of the temple, but Luke does in Luke chapter 21, verses 20 to 24. Matthew does, however, record the answer to the second question about the sign of his second coming in Matthew chapter 24, verses 29 to 31. But the question that we are looking at is the third question about the signs of the end of the age. Jesus answers this question in 4 stages. The first stage is Matthew chapter 24, verses 4 to 6, and describes things we will see but are not direct indicators that the beginning of the end has yet started. The second stage is Matthew 24, 7 to 8, and describes things that are clear indicators that the end of the age has begun. Jesus refers to these things as birth pangs. The third stage is Matthew chapter 24, verses 9 to 14, which describes the first half of the tribulation. And the fourth stage is Matthew chapter 24, verses 15 to 28, which describes the second half of the tribulation. For our purposes, we will look at the first and second stages, which occur prior to the start of the tribulation. In stage 1, Matthew 24, 4 to 6, Jesus answers his disciples like this: "See that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet." In this passage, Jesus lists two primary things that are not indicators that the end has begun, namely, false messiahs, who are people who claim to be Christ or like Christ, and they will lead many people down the wrong path. You may not initially think there are many people who have claimed to be Christ or whose followers have claimed that their leader is Christ. But this scrolling list is just a few of the most famous, or should I say infamous. Jesus also mentions wars and rumors of wars, which are regional or local wars. Records are hard to find for the last 2,000 years, but in the 20th century alone, there were over 250 regional and local wars recorded. Stage 2 is what we are most concerned with and is found in Matthew chapter 24, verses 7 to 8, where Jesus says, "For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pangs." Here Jesus mentions three things that will be the evidence that the end times has begun, namely, world wars or global conflicts, which are described as nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom. The first time worldwide conflict ever occurred was World War I, and this prophecy was fulfilled through World Wars I and II. Incidentally, World War I was a pivotal period in the history of the Zionist movement, which was the national movement for the return of the Jewish people to their homeland and the resumption of Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. Among other things, it brought the Balfour Declaration on November 2, 1917, which was a public statement issued by the British government announcing support for the reestablishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. Also, the outcome of World War II directly influenced the international community's decision to support Jewish statehood and created conditions that led to the widespread recognition of the need for a sovereign Jewish state as a response to the atrocities of the Holocaust. Famines are also mentioned by Jesus. Although there have always been famines, from the beginning throes of World War I through the after effects of World War II, more than 72 million people died due to famine. Jesus also mentions earthquakes. As you can see from this chart, earthquakes have increased significantly in the last 50 years and are being recorded with modern equipment from all over the world in all kinds of diverse places. The fourth pre-tribulation event is the reestablishment of Israel as an independent state. This is a pre-tribulation requirement because it would be impossible for the Antichrist to execute a 7-year peace covenant with Israel unless Israel was officially declared a state and had the authority to sign such a covenant. Israel became a state on May 14, 1948. The fifth pre-tribulation event is the Jewish control of the Temple Mount. This is critical because both Old Testament and New Testament prophecies state that the temple will be fully functional at the midpoint of the tribulation when the Antichrist breaks the 7-year covenant with Israel and defiles the temple with what is referred to as an abomination of desolation. Having control of the Temple Mount could occur at the time of the signing of the peace covenant. However, from June 5th through June 10th, 1967, Israel expanded its territory during the Six-Day War, which included acquiring the Old City of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, thus fulfilling this requirement. In our next lesson, we will look at the Russian invasion of Israel.